Well, that's a really difficult question, if I'm honest, because I write in 4 maybe genres: science fiction, fantasy, supernatural, and steampunk. Don't know if you know what steampunk is, but it's old technology, steam engines, clocks, pulleys, put in present day stories. So I haven't got a particular genre, so books or films or TV shows and stuff, I could definitely say Time Tunnel when I was a kid, Doctor Who, the Star Wars saga, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, the Airborne series by Kenneth Oppel, a Canadian author. I don't know, there's so many sci-fi stuff, the Twilight Zone, I'm continually, The Dome. There's so much stuff out there that cover my genres. I love a little bit of everything. In the 60s and 70s we had the Champions, we had the Giants, Land of the Giants, Lost in Space. I could go on and on and on with that one. That wouldn't be fair, actually, take up most of the interview.
In terms of fantasy, I was always kind of into the magic and things that were a little bit darker. So R.L. Stine, for instance, was a very big influence on me throughout my life, I would say. In terms of fantasy itself, I think Terry Pratchett was really the one that got me into it, because, you know, the humour's fantastic, the magic's fantastic, and just combining those two together was... these books are just unique, aren't they?
My favourite genre to read, as well as to write, is fantasy. I first fell in love with the genre with Harry Potter. I grew up with Harry Potter, so it was one of my childhood favourites, and ever since then I've always enjoyed fantasy books. Some of the books that I liked as a child were Philip Pullman's Northern Lights and Garth Nix's Old Kingdom series. I did expand into other genres, but I've always come back to fantasy as my main comfort.
So genre, that is a hard question to answer. I love books, I love TV, I love film, so picking one or two things that really kind of inspired me into that genre is not particularly easy. I mean, as a teenager, I kind of jumped, really. I was reading a lot of R.L. Stine. I loved my point horror books. I was into the interesting or the weirder type stuff, something that was a bit more thrilling. I've never really liked or got into romance, so things that were a bit more shocking was really more my cup of tea. But as I got older, I kind of fell in love with horror in a different way. So Stephen King was a great influence. Being a book nerd and being a nerd all round, I fell in love with Terry Pratchett, who's always done fantasy and something different in a really imaginative way, and it was your own kind of voice, and it was because of that I kind of really loved the idea of not being afraid to do something a bit quirky, a bit strange, something that's different from what's already out there, and that's why I love that kind of genre. And I think particularly with young adult, it's good because you can do anything, you can be anything, you can present anything in that kind of genre, and it's not going to be taken too seriously. It can be interesting and different without being very much believable in a sense. It doesn't have to be real to be enjoyed, and that's what I love about the genre. You know, in particular, films like Drop Dead Fred was a great influence for me. I've always loved Rick Mao and that kind of craziness, so very much where I wanted to take it.
There's no real book, film or TV show which has made me fall in love with the genre which I'm writing. It's children's books at the moment. I've got ideas for all sorts of different genres, but it's just that children's books happen to come out of the brain first.
One of my favourite books which got me into really enjoying and falling in love with fantasy was Ink Heart by Cornelia Funk, as well as Ink Spell and Ink Death. The way the world grows from her main characters in the world by pulling the characters out of the books and giving them their own lives, that put a different spin on it. Putting the actual real life people into the books of Ink's Heart itself, that was a good way of doing it, because that was changing it, and that I really enjoyed. And you saw that further into Ink Spell and Ink Death. That was something that would later on give me the idea for my novel Lost Words. The fantasy aspect that's inside the whole of her series, where they go into the books or come out of books, you just don't know what you're going to get, and it's in so much detail. It's a beautiful read. Something else that got me into fantasy, especially book-wise, was Eragon. The whole of the book series for Eragon goes deep into fantasy and builds up around the mythological of the dragons and riders and the different creatures. That has a lot of world building into it as well. very different to what many people would prefer, so it's a lot better in what I understand. Something else that got me into fantasy is the Final Fantasy games. Not something that got me into writing so much, but the story of the game itself is what got me into the fantasy world. Final Fantasy IX was one of my favourites. It's got the old style of fantasy in it, steampunk and airships. It's one of the better games out there, very underrated as well, but the magic in it got so much of fantasy aspect that you wouldn't normally see in anything else nowadays. The magic is very built into the world itself, and it runs the airships, the people, there's so many different races, what helps to build up the world and create it as a fantasy story. And that is something that I like to implement into my book series, Tridea's Children.